Hey, what's going on, guys? In today's video, we're not really going to be doing a review of this guy because we've already had a look at him now twice, but I got a couple of comments from viewers that said, could you show us your Hot Toys Spider-Man collection? Now, I don't have a robust collection of Spider-Man from Hot Toys. Ultimately, I didn't really pick up any of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man filmed Spider-Man, and having seen reviews of those from other reviewers, I really don't think I'm missing out all that much, and maybe eventually if they ever consider the idea of doing a Tobey Maguire re-release, or improving the sculpts and stuff like that, I might go and pick those up. So I don't have those to compare to, but this is the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man, which again we've already had a look at. I've got him on his display base for the time being, and I think he looks kind of cool. I didn't go super crazy when it came to a pose on this guy, just something that I could put in the detail for the time being until I eventually come up with something a little bit more creative. I tried to keep them pretty more statuesque, I suppose, in the details. But in the meantime, that was the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man. And per the questions that I got showcasing my other ones, well, the only other Spider-Man that I have from Hot Toys are the ones from the Amazing Spider-Man movie. And I guess also too the reasoning why I don't have the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans was primarily just because I really wasn't collecting Hot Toys at that point, or if I was, I might have only had like the Batman or something like that. So I don't even think Batman came out at that line. And anyways, so I didn't really have much in the way of Hot Toys back then, but I did pick up the Amazing Spider-Man Hot Toys, which I just so happen to have one in my hand right now. So we're going to do the comparison between the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man, and here we have the Amazing Spider-Man from Spider-Man 2, or Amazing Spider-Man 2. There's Spider-Man. One of the other things, actually, you know what? We won't bring the other one in just yet. At the time, I did quite like this costume, and really, to some extent, I still do. Now that I compare it, though, to the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man, one thing I do notice about the two webbings is I didn't realize how silver this one actually comes across. I do watch the movies still. It's not one of my regular viewing movies, but I do watch it from time to time. It's one of my least favorite Spider-Man films. I would probably still say Spider-Man 3 is my least favorite. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is probably my second favorite. I just don't like Electro. I think Electro is terrible in the movie. But the costume is actually pretty good. And, here's the Andrew Garfield version of Spider-Man, which I guess from a height-wise, I'm going to take Spider-Man off from Spider-Man Homecoming. I just want to do some scale comparisons. Obviously, I just can't have them stacked for the entire review. So I'm just going to straighten out his legs. Straighten out his feet. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, so here's what Spider-Man Homecoming looks like versus the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I suppose, to no surprise, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Spider-Man is a lot taller. The actors are considerably different in height also. Andrew Garfield is quite a considerable... he is the tallest of the Spider-Man if you don't count really like the older series. But just a close look at this Spider-Man. One thing I did like about it is that he had really large eyes, which this one doesn't really technically have. It has more closer to like a classic comic sort of design, but I like that this one had the very large eyes. But I didn't realize how silver his costume really is now until I start comparing it to the Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man, where you really start seeing a big jump in color palettes. I also didn't realize that his pants were as blue as they were, like really, really dark blue, almost like the same sort of coloring that we got from the Man of Steel Superman costume initially, where you can see like all these little almost chainlet sort of pattern work that's been done to the costume, and there's all these little panel lines and stuff like that. I do really like the large emblem. It's one of my favorite Spider, especially the poster. I really like that kind of dripping, elongated spider logo. The spider logo on the front is a little bit smaller, well, a little more compact, but it still has the longer legs. Although you do really get it lost amongst all the silver webbing. It's really kind of hard to make it out. I don't even remember what I said about this guy when I initially reviewed him, but I'm surprised I probably I probably would have overlooked the fact of mentioning that everything on this guy is very pale and silver. Especially like the logo. The logo just gets lost amongst all the webbing that it's really hard to make it out. It's still really got a good looking head sculpt. Everything inside is encapsulated, so this is all like fabric wrapped around a head. You can't swap out the head. But you know, it's still a really nice looking Spider-Man. And I like this one a lot. I don't know if I'm as fond of the detachable hands, or more importantly, the fingers that could come off from Spider-Man's hands. So this would stay the same because they attached it to the fabric. The fabric went to here, and they glued it. And then here was plastic, and you simply just replaced out the fingers to the fingers that you wanted to use. But it ultimately always seemed to leave a real noticeable gap. I don't know if I really like that as much. The webbing's on the inside as well. Yeah, not a bad looking Spider-Man. So that was up to the point of owning this guy. This was the second Spider-Man that I owned in my collection. It's also interesting to note that it seems really dark up here on the top of his mask. I don't know if it was actually originally like that or if it's gotten dirty, but I certainly hope it. I think it was just stained when I initially got it. So anyways, there's the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Spider-Man, tongue-tied right now. The original Amazing Spider-Man 2 Spider-Man. And of course, the one prior to that, if I get these guys to stand properly, the one that I had a look at before that was the Amazing Spider-Man 1 Spider-Man. I'll just move these guys all over. Move him over. And we'll bring this guy a little bit closer in. Now, this one is a stark difference when it comes to his design palettes, his design elements, I suppose. I feel like I don't know if he's got dust on him. I mean, I've been keeping this guy inside of a cabinet. I don't know if maybe dust has gotten on him or somehow got inside the cabinet. The base, circular base, dusty. You think I would have dusted that off, but Amazing Spider-Man, first Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man on the front placard. A little bit smaller, of course, than the Homecoming Spider-Man. Now, this guy had the removable mask. You could take the mask off and replace it with a Andrew Garfield face sculpt. One of the problems I did have with the figure's head, though, is that the head is very prone to falling off a lot. It's just pegged in. I don't really know why they didn't use magnets. Magnets would have been a smarter choice. And ultimately, it's just a peg. It's a peg, like a prong peg that attaches on the interior of the head. One thing I do like about this particular Spider-Man, and I still like it to this day, is it is an extreme difference in design than a traditional Spider-Man costume. You know, the Tobey Maguires, we had a traditional Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man 2, a traditional Spider-Man. And really, to some extent, Spider-Man Homecoming, even though it's got a much more updated sort of costume with the striping in his legs and all that additional black, it's still a traditional looking Spider-Man costume. Amazing Spider-Man 1 Spider-Man, however, was quite the contrast, very different altogether. And I think it's one of the reasons why I still like this costume to this day. It's got a really neat design element to it. I don't know why he's got so much dust on him. I do apologize. The costume, as best as I could describe it in the movie, looked like it was made out of like a basketball. It had almost like a rubbery look to it. And specifically, one thing that stands out about this particular design was the choice of using almost yellow, almost like honey yellow sort of lenses for his eyes. Interesting in his choice, but I have to admit, I like it. Anybody would say, well, it's not a traditional Spider-Man, which is really the problem when it comes to remakes. Viewers as a whole generally will be like, well, you have to keep it closer to the original source material. If they have it too close to the original source material, which is one of the problems that the new Star Wars has. A lot of people would say, and I'm going way off topic, but the viewers would say, the critics would say, that the previous Star Wars was good, but it was too much treading on New Hope. So of course, with the Last Jedi, they go to the very extreme, and ultimately then give us something that breaks really the concept of what traditional Star Wars would be, and fans hate it. So what I like about this particular, and that's the segue that I want to make to this Spider-Man costume, what I like so much about this Spider-Man costume is it's somebody that just said, okay, I'm going to design a brand new Spider-Man costume that still takes cues from its original sort of comic material, but it expands on it and gives us something a little bit different. So here we've got the incorporated areas of like the weird looking boots, which, as you can see, has the additional silver and blue added to it. The undersole almost looks closer to more like a running shoe than it does an actual Spider-Man boot. The webbing is not quite just a series of grid. Instead, what you get down here is you have varying patterns. Some are just straight lines, and then it goes off into a more gridded traditional Spider-Man webbing. And then the texturing on the suit was a little bit lighter, by contrast to Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I don't like the dark blue, but this was a more traditional lighter blue. And then you had all the additional webbing, like panel lines here on the actual costume. The spider emblem, a much wider emblem, although I don't like, and I still don't like, how it has the cuts through the spider legs. So instead of having the legs just going straight through, there's these very obvious sort of gaps in between the sections of the leg, especially down here. I just wish the legs were straight as opposed to having these cuts going through them. But a much more extreme sort of spider web, spider logo, which carries over to the back here and also has the kind of little gaps in between the legs. So I'm not as crazy about that, but I really do still like the costume. If anything, of the movies, this one I seem to have a soft spot for with its design. It's different, yes, but it's kind of cool. Like it's really got a neat looking element to it. It's somewhat funny though that of the three Spider-Men, I warmed closer to this one. I warmed up to this one quicker, is what I should say, versus Spider-Man Homecoming. It took me a long time to get used to that costume and to actually like the costume, whereas this one I seem to get right interested into the costume right away. This one, in all honesty, even though it does have the larger eyes and a more conventional looking Spider-Man look, I really didn't like the coloring, especially even in the movie. He had the good designs, but I found the reds and the blues were way too dark. I still feel like they're way too dark. So even looking at the Hot Toys release of this guy, I do feel like he is a little on the dark, too dark almost of a shade, where comparing this one to the Homecoming, this one's got bright reds, it's got some bright blues, it's very, very, just in general, it's very, very bright. This one here still has the bright coloring, but it's more muted because because of the fabric that they've used. It just feels more like a wetsuit, feels more like, that it would be a spandex, versus this one here feels like it's more of a fabric sort of material. Of course, for this comparison, I didn't bring in the interchangeable heads, nor did I bring in the accessories. It was really just a case of comparing the three different versions of the Hot Toys that at least I have in my collection. Maybe eventually I would go back to picking up the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but in all honesty, having a look at some of the older reviews that reviewers have done, say of, the Iron Man, the Batman figures, and the Spider-Man figures before released from Hot Toys, I find in all honesty it would be hard for me to pick those up and not look at them as if they're really dated. The Spider-Man benefit from the fact that the costumes have the masks covering over it, so you can get a little bit more, away from the fact that the sculpts are a little bit more basic versus an unmasked hero. But still, I'd be more inclined to wait it out. And, for all the Jokers that we've gotten from Hot Toys, maybe eventually Hot Toys may also release, re-release Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Do like an ultimate Spider-Man. It doesn't have to be the black costume. It doesn't have to be the ones from the different movies. But maybe just an ultimate Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Has interchangeable heads. You'd have the unmasked Tobey Maguire head. You could have the masked Spider-Man head. And then just have all the accessories that he had through the three films. Eventually maybe give us like a Comic-Con version of that in the black suit version. And I would be more inclined to pick those up because I really would love to get Not every single Hot Toy that was ever released, but I think, you know, like the Batmans that I have in my collection, I'd like to have at least one version of each of the movie Batmans. So I have like the Adam West, the Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, of course, and Ben Affleck. I'd like to really do the same with Spider-Man as well. So I suppose technically, if I wanted to put these in proper order, I would move Amazing Spider-Man over. I have Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man all on display. I'd like to get some better stands, though. I have a stand for this one. I don't remember whether Amazing Spider-Man 1 Spider-Man had a stand. I'll have to go and bring out the box. I've got it in storage somewhere and see if I can find the box for those, and maybe see if I can bring out some of the accessories as well. Because right now, I really only had them in standing poses in my Detolf. I know many people would just say that's very boring. That's very bland. Try to jazz that up a bit. I am far from a person that displays their Hot Toys in dramatic poses. You'd never find my Spider-Man like hanging upside down or you know leaping in the air, spinning webs or anything like that. Generally, mine are just kind of standing staction, just because of how much space I have. You know, I can fit usually four Hot Toys in one shelf. If I was to get into any more crazier poses of these guys, of course, that would limit how many Hot Toys I could probably put on display in the cabinet. But this was a little comparison video. I like to do these from time to time. It's kind of fun to go back to the collection. Like, I really haven't had these two out on display, out of the display cabinet for years. Even when I moved, I took these guys out of the cabinet, and then ultimately I put them back in the Detolfs when I moved to the new place. So I really have not had a chance to really bring these out and have a look at these. So it works out well for me. I kind of like doing these comparison videos because it gives me a chance to kind of bring these out again and have a look at some of the collectibles that I had back in the day. Still, one of my all-time favorite designs for the costumes. I'm probably of the few that think this, but I still like the Amazing Spider-Man Spider-Man. I really do think he's got some fun design elements and very drastically different than some of the other ones that we would see on film. Let me know down below, guys, what you think is your all-time favorite Spider-Man costume in the films. You know, do you like the Spider-Man Homecoming as your all-time favorite Spider-Man costume? Do you kind of get closer to more the Amazing Spider-Man 2? Maybe even go back to even further and enjoy more so the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. But let me know down below in the comments section, what is your all-time favorite Spider-Man costume from the films? And also let me know what your all-time favorite Hot Toys Spider-Man figure is as well. I'd be interested to read your comments. I always like to talk back and forth with you guys in the comments section below. Gonna do some more of these comparison videos because, like I said, I have a real blast doing them. And again, I've been a big fan of the Spider-Man Homecoming figure, so I wanted to kind of break this guy out again and have a look at him with some other previously looked at Spider-Man on this channel. If you guys haven't also had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, make sure you do so. Of course, more videos and comparison videos will be coming out onto this channel, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.